Down in Petersburg, everything's fine. All them cats is drinking that wine. Drinking that mess is their delight. When you get drunk, start singing all night. Drinking wine's for you to drink wine. Wine's for you to drink wine. Wine's for you to drink wine. Pass that bottle to me. Drinking that mess is their delight. When it gets drunk, start fighting all night.
Welcome to another fabulous episode of Tasting Anarchy. I'm Jake Lindsay, and as always, I'm joined by the
Mason Joseph.
Yep, Mason Joseph, the most awesome co-host around. I think you're pretty high off of your appearance on Sounds Like Liberty.
Yes, my triumphant episode. Well, hopefully they agree, and hopefully they didn't go, this was garbage, and we're not going to post it. And then I'm just sitting here looking like a jackass.
Yeah,
but
well,
if they do, that's their choice.
If they do, that's
I enjoyed my time with them.
Right,
so.
and if they do decide they don't want to post it, maybe we can get the audio from them and post it on our show.
That'd be fun.
Yeah. So. This week, we both have wines, and I think that maybe like the old format where one of us has a wine and the other one just kind of briefly comments is out the window at this point, because you and I are both just stocked on wine at this point.
Yes.
You from your birthday and me from being my normal obsessive self and overbuying, over trying everything. If anybody wants to understand how much wine I'm drinking at this point. Now, granted, not to excess, like I'm almost never drunk, but I have enough wine open right now to do 4 mini episodes next week, and including this one that I'm going to do tonight. So I'm going to try to. Victoria has business out of town for next week, so she'll be in Hotlanta, and so it's a bachelor's life for me. Well, to whatever extent that is meaning like I get to go to the gym and stay there for a reasonable amount of time, in my opinion, which is shorter because she won't be stretching and all that sort of stuff, and then come home and do mini episodes, because what's better for a bachelor than mini episodes of Tasting Anarchy?
I was going to say, what you really mean is you're going to come home and just play with Foxy.
That's probably true, actually, because she's a sweet dog. Did I tell you, Mason, speaking of Foxy news, I believe that we have found and are going to be getting a black Shiba Inu to go with Foxy, who I will be calling Mulder. So we'll have Foxy and Mulder, and they will be black and gold. So I should be able to get that dog in late April.
Interesting. You did not tell me that. That's is it a girl or a guy?
A boy. So for background information for humans who don't know Shibas are like a unique breed. They're called like I can't remember exactly what it's called, but they're like closer to wolves than most modern dog breeds. So they can be very, very aggressive, and they're also very, very hierarchical. And apparently females don't get along very well with other females.
Yeah, most female dogs, it's either hit or miss. Like either they get along really well or they don't at all.
Yeah.
So, in my experience.
Well, apparently, according to what I read online, is that with Shibas, if you don't get them both as puppies, both girls as puppies, they will just tear each other apart day after day after day, and one of them will, and they'll never submit to the other one. Whereas boy Shibas are perfectly fine being submissive or being dominant. So if you get a boy Shiba as a puppy and you already have a girl Shiba, the boy Shiba will submit and become the beta or whatever in the pack. So we're gonna get a boy, and actually Foxy, she didn't used to play very well with other dogs. Lately, she's doing really, really well with other dogs.
Good. Yeah, I thought I kind of had the feeling that she just kind of needed to grow into her own skin.
Yeah, and I think just being around other dogs a lot more helped. Like being around Henry was helpful to some degree, because she started realizing that she can't like just pin any dog on the ground and start humping it. She's got it, because then like you or I'll come in and go like, hey, and when we bring her to the dog park, she realized that she can't like do anything to big dogs, because even though she's a medium, I guess she's a small dog. She's not like a toy dog, but 25 pounds or whatever. She's just figuring it out. But for those of you who listen to the show and follow us on Twitter at Tasting Anarchy, or on Instagram, Tasting Anarchy on Instagram, you will know who Foxy is and what I'm talking about, because she is a very cute dog, and I include her in all the pictures of my wine.
Well, let's take a step back.
Okay.
She's in the new cover art of the show.
Oh, that's right. I forgot about that. Yeah, good segue. Good segue. Yes. Yeah. So we have new art that I got from a pretty talented lady on Etsy. She gave us, so we may be trying it up, and already we've been memed multiple times by other Liberty podcasters, and
just one.
Yeah, that's true. Yeah. But it's a lot of fun to see what people do when they can just kind of like quickly chop your head out and put it on all sorts of weird other things. I've also started learning a little bit about memeing, and I can now chop heads out and put them on ridiculous things. So that's how I, Twitter is such an interesting environment because you've really got like the community that Tasting Anarchy, our Twitter handle is, which is mostly me, is involved in, and it's just kind of like ludicrous. It's just a lot of silliness, a lot of ridiculousness. And then you've got like everything else, it seems like to me. It's either really, really silly, really left-wing anal, or all advertisement.
Yeah, and then there's the like background, like data transfer and, the kind of like the schemingness. It's not like left or right necessarily. Yeah,
I guess that's true. Yeah. All right, well, let's go ahead and get into the wine now that we've kind of shot the shit for 5 minutes. So this week, I'll go ahead and you want to do your wine first, or you want me to do mine first?
No, go ahead with yours.
Okay, so I could have sworn I did this wine already, but I was looking back through our episodes and I could not find it. This same company does another one that we did do an episode on called Owl Post, Pinotage. I don't know if you remember that one, Mason.
The name is very familiar, but not necessarily the flavors.
Okay. I don't remember if it was a episode that we did together or if it was one where I was here. But I did have one episode where either I or we reviewed Owl Post Pinotage. The same winery, which is I'm gonna butcher this name because it's some sort of weird South African name. It's Neethlingshof, so it's probably German. So it's Neethlingshof Estate 2017 Pinotage, and I think we used to call it Pinotage. I believe it is actually pronounced Pinotage. So that is the wine I am reviewing tonight. It is the cheap.
Now, real quick, it was one where we were together. The classic episode.
Okay, great. Okay, so classic. So I remember really liking the Pinotage, and I believe you liked it as well.
I believe so.
But I don't recall exactly. I've had this one before, and of the Owl Post and of the Neethlingshof estate, this right now is the 2017. It's cheaper than the 2017 Owl Post, but the 2016 Owl Post was cheaper than the 2016 Neethlingshof. So I don't know what's going on price-wise there. It's just maybe one year they had a good year for whatever they select for the Neethlingshof, and the Owl Post another year that was good. So who knows? But in the episode where we were talking to John Davidanius, who has the winery in Oregon, in Portland, he was talking about how he went to South Africa, and it's such a hot climate that like it really affects the grapes, and they can be very high sugar, which produces high alcohol, and they look like they're kind of withering. Maybe it had something to do with that. Maybe 2016 was like the beginning of the drought, so they didn't have any sort of backup for getting water there, or who knows what it is, but that's all my speculation. But anyways, This is 14% alcohol by volume. It's $15 a bottle right now. It has a whole bunch of little holographic labels on it because it apparently won some awards in the last 2 years, and which is kind of cool, I guess. But it was mixed in with the 2016 bottles, even though they had two separate labels, and so the 2016 was a little bit more expensive. But this is $15. I think a really good deal for 2015. So, or for $15. So, to give a little background on Pinotage, you can go back and listen to the Owl Post episode. What episode is that, Mason? Do you have it pulled up?
I'm sorry, it's episode 29.
Oh, 29. Okay, so episode 29, we give a little bit more, I guess, information on Pinotage, but just so everybody knows, Pinotage is the premier South African varietal. It's really not grown that many other places besides South Africa. It's a cross between Pinot Noir and what used to be called Hermitage. It's now called Sinsalt. I don't know how to pronounce it, but it was developed in South Africa around 1925, but it took almost another 20 years for it to be commercially produced. So the guy who produced it just like planted it in his garden and was like, whatever. And then I guess somebody found it later on, really liked it, and was like, oh, I'm going to graft this to disease-resistant rootstock, and started planting it in South Africa. It became a big hit in South Africa, and it's taken off ever since. So, yep.
Real quick,
Sure.
they grow Pinotage in Virginia.
Oh, really? Okay.
Mm-hmm.
So I know that, like, from what it says online is that, like, acre for acre or hectare for hectare, it's just not grown that much outside of South Africa.
Mm-hmm.
I wonder what the Virginia one would be like.
That's a good question. Yeah, we'd have to try it.
Yeah, maybe that would be kind of a cool one to track down.
Yeah.
I've been really into tracking down weird wines lately.
You have.
Yeah.
Given
Long
me
drives.
several to try to find, and that leads into the one that I'm doing.
Okay.
So I have an Italian wine. I have Donnachiara's Campania Aglianico IGT 2016. So I butchered all of that. The grape varietal is the Aglianico, which I think is something relating to angels.
Mm-hmm.
Donnachiara's is the name of the winery. And then the Campina is part of I think the region. So it's an IGT, so it's like that secondary or third tier of Italian wines where it's like, you make good wines, we don't classify for the other two.
Mm-hmm.
So we were going to have a guest on who unfortunately, like you and I couldn't get the multi-communication thing we were going to do to have the guest on to work.
Yeah.
And then unfortunately the guest wasn't able to come on because she had some family sickness. So, we had gotten this one, but this is it's $17.99 at Total Wine right now.
Mm-hmm.
It's funny because if you look it up and you go to the Italian website, €9. So,
oh, interesting. Okay.
You can kind of see what the cost difference is there, and so this is it's a red varietal. It's not very tannic. It's not very acidic. Now, I've had the bottle open for several days. I'm on the last of it, but this is one of those ones where, like, this is really good red wine.
Yeah.
But it's kind of classic red wine, but I don't want to use the word drawback, but
Mm-hmm.
like some people are like, oh, it's too acidic or it's too tannic or all of that stuff. It's just kind of got like a nice red wine flavor. Very dark ruby color, like you can see light through it pretty easily. But it's one of those, it's got a yeasty smell to it a bit.
Mm-hmm.
The kind of blackberry is the descriptor terms like they use. Now, their website, like the actual one, and we'll link to it in the show notes, it's pretty funny, like, because it's pretty well done, and like they kind of give you like when it was harvested and all that. The bottle had it on it too. Unfortunately, I didn't bring the bottle with me, so I don't
Mm-hmm.
have the alcohol percentage by volume because neither place decided to list it.
Right.
But, yeah, it's like, they talk about the vines, the hectares. I mean, like, they say the bouquet is persistence of a marina and wild blackberry with delightful toasted flavors. I don't necessarily get that, but they do say, the palate soft and elegant with suggestions of berries and strawberry jam. I get a little more blackberry but like definitely a jam flavor.
Yeah.
And very, very soft. They go, food affinities outstanding with pasta with full body sauces, steak and cheese.
Mm-hmm.
Not big on the cheese. I don't think it's aggressive enough for steak because I don't think it will take the fat out of like a fattier steak.
Mm-hmm.
Like I don't think it'll pull that out of your mouth like a lot of the like cab would. But yeah, definitely one of those red wines where it's like, like this is like a fun new experience. But even on there, they've got like the training system that the vines were put under, the type of soil, the period of harvest. I mean, it's a really interesting website for a wine specifically that's like €9.
Yeah. Well, this company, don't they have several tiers of the same wine?
I don't know if they have several tiers of the same wine.
Okay.
I didn't get that far into it, but they definitely, it's kind of like most wineries. They kind of have different tiers of the wines.
Yeah.
Like, kind of my favorite Virginia winery at the moment, the Williamsburg winery. They have some like super expensive exotics and just high end regular production stuff, and then they've got like the $4.99 Governor's wine, which isn't bad, but so they've got different varietals. But yeah, this is I think when you finally open yours, because if you did get it,
I put it in the closet because I thought we were going to do it, but I think that you and I are going to go in a different direction next month when we reschedule our guest.
Yeah, I think you'll definitely really enjoy it.
Okay.
So one of those ones that if you wanted, because we were going to do where I did a mini on it, and then you were going to do the full episode because it's just the way and things ended up working out with the way we thought we were going to go. Definitely, kind of, if you get a chance to do a mini, let us know how you think about it.
Okay.
I think you'll really enjoy it, or you'll really dislike it. I don't think you'll be in the middle on it, but I have a feeling because it's got that classic red wineness to it without having a lot of the other stuff, which I think you'll think is really interesting.
Okay.
That, or you'll be like, Mason was completely off base with all this stuff.
Well, I mean, maybe I will. Like that's one of the cool things about wine in general is that the flavor in wine is so incredibly subjective. And it really depends on the person. This kind of goes even into wine experts, is that you'll see some wine experts will give, everything plays into it. So it's even your impression of the region it's from plays into it. So like I gave this kind of tidbit in one of the minis, I think, where they were, they had a blind taste test, and what ended up winning was like South New Jersey wines. And the sommeliers, the master sommeliers and stuff were so offended that they would choose a South New Jersey that they wouldn't allow the results to be published. And it's like, well, who cares if it's good? But it's like, it's so incredibly subjective. And then also one of the cool things about wine, and this is what I went into the mini this past week a little bit, was it's something I've been thinking about a little bit lately, especially after I had Mr. Sue on. Was if I tell somebody that something is gross or that I don't like something, does that change their opinion of the wine? And I think in the case of wine, because it's so subjective and so much of it is reliant on the story, it does really impact that. That's, I think, one of the reasons I'm kind of reluctant to give a bad review on something is because I don't want people to think that it's a bad wine. I want them to try it and figure it out themselves. But once you mentioned that it was an Italian wine, that kind of reminded me that I don't think I went into the flavors of mine at all.
No, you didn't. That was very funny.
So let me quickly do that before we get into some of the topics. So back to my wine, which is the Neethlingshof Estate 2017 Pinotage, 14% alcohol by volume, $15. This is the notes that I made on it. I said it's not very strong or complex smell, but has a typical red fruit smell expected of red wines. There is a hint of yeastiness, and the booziness is very, very low for a 14%. The taste is very good. It has a strong cherry flavor, and this is like a red cherry, not like I've talked about this before, like the black cherry flavor. This is more of along the lines of a ripe red cherry. It has a hint of black pepper, but very, very, very light, not like a Carmenere, which you and Mason and I have had, and had that pepperiness, which was very interesting. Actually, I think I mentioned it to you in the classic episode where we recorded on your porch. Mm-hmm. I had that Carmenere, and it was just like black pepper right in your face. And this has a hint of black pepper, but it's not in your face. It's fairly acidic, but it's not overpowering acidity. It has very soft tannins, but there are tannins. And a slight metallic flavor, a little tiny, tiny, tiny bit of maybe tobacco or leather. Man, I always say too much. I got to work on that. I think it's very well balanced for a $15 wine. Usually when I get a $15 wine, it's usually strong one way or the other. This is very, very even. And I like the evenness when it's not just like bland evenness, when it's like all of these flavors kind of work together to complement each other. So it actually reminds me a lot of, and this is where it ties back into the Italian wine. I had a Cabernet Franc, an Italian Cabernet Franc that was a lot more aggressive than the French version or the Napa versions of Cabernet Franc, and it was called I'm gonna butcher this so bad, guys. Chiarosa Toscana Pergolaya. So
Pergolaya.
Yeah, I don't know exactly how to say that, but it was a 100% Cabernet Franc. One of the noble grapes, but grown in Italy. I thought it was a very, very interesting Cabernet Franc, and I'm a huge fan, Mason, of Cabernet Francs.
You are, yes.
And this one was just very, very different. This Pinotage in general reminds me of Cabernet Franc, but this one in particular reminds me of this specific Cabernet Franc. So if anybody's interested in trying it, it's very inexpensive. I think actually the Italian one, the whatever, I'm not going to say it, the Italian one, I think that one's actually $25. So if you were going to choose between the two, I would go with this from South Africa because I think it's very similar. It's not exactly the same, obviously, but it's similar, and I think you're getting a lot more bang for your buck.
Now, did you get that at Total Wine?
Yes, I did. I got it from Total Wine. It's actually not. For those of my listeners that are in Dallas, it's not available at the Park Lane Total Wine. It's only this one I got when I was out in Fort Worth. So it's at the Fort Worth one. They have a ton at Fort Worth, but for whatever reason, they won't ship it over to the Park Lane one. And So I drove all the way out there. I wanted to get something else, Mason, as you know, but it was like a 50-minute drive out to the other Fort Worth Total Wine to get the thing that I wanted. And while I was there, I just was trying to find the things I knew they had that the Park Lane one didn't have. So I ended up getting like 12 bottles of wine while I was there, and it was all like weird stuff that they just didn't have at the Park Lane one. So
speaking of weird and getting wines, so my birthday was in late January, or is in late January. So my wife got me, as you know, Jacob, a subscription to Gold Club's wine service. So every 3 months I'll get 3 wines, and they've got like little food samplers and stuff. So the one I got was Chilean. So I've got a Sauvignon Blanc. I've got a Carmenare, which I'm looking forward to drinking, and then we had a Malbec, and I finished the Malbec, and unfortunately I didn't take good enough notes to really do a review on it. But then my parents also got me a Groupon certificate for Splash Wines, which I had not heard of as a distributor, and it's like 18 of their best wines of 2018. So I got 8 whites, not 8 reds, and 2 rosés. So now in my laundry room, I have like 18 bottles of wine, and it was like, it was kind of like daunting to try to figure out where to put all these wines.
Sure. Oh yeah.
So that my daughter wouldn't knock them over. And so I now have like just strategically trying to figure out what to open and when to open it and how to do reviews on it. Cause like I've had a Semillon.
I think that's close.
Yeah, it always makes me think of the Silmarillion. So I think I'm just going to call it the Silmarillion wine.
All right.
I had a small bottle that I was trying to see if you could get at Total Wine to try to do a unique review before we got more, or before you specifically dug deeper into these more exotics.
Yeah.
But so now I've got because I just finished the Dominica one, bottle wise. Like, we have 21 bottles of wine in my house, which is more wine than I've ever had. And the splash wines, they're not, I don't think any of them are over 25 by themselves, but like 2 Tempranielos, which I was super pumped about.
Yeah, that's awesome. Yeah.
Yeah, and like just a bunch of like other stuff, and like a couple that like a red and a white from a specific vineyard, so like kind of get to see the different styles. So it's like, this is like a incredible birthday haul.
Yeah, that is a cool birthday haul. I'm actually very excited to hear your opinion on those rosés, because that's one of the I've been dipping my toe into being a millennial. And I've been getting dry rosés lately, like just a bottle of dry rosé. Actually, I think I've gone through maybe 3 or 4, and they are very, very easy drinking and very refreshing. So I'm very curious to see what your opinion of them. I don't know if they're dry or sweet, but I find them very interesting.
I think one is called The Final Rose, which is like some sort of reference to The Bachelor or Bachelorette. So you may be able to look that up.
Okay. All right.
But you have the full list. So, because I texted you that picture of it was really cool, because in the shipping thing from Splash Wines, they printed a list, and it was like specific to you, because they were kind of like, depending on when you claim your Groupon, they may not have everything they would have normally recommended.
Yeah.
So they're like, for Mason specifically, and I was like, oh, this is fun.
Well, I've got a good segue based on that, and that is, let's go to the second article I have in the notes, because a shorter article, and it ties into you getting all the Chilean wines. So this article is actually, let me pull it up again, because it's from Decanter magazine, but the article's title is Brexit, UK and US sign wine and spirits trade deals. It's by Chris Mercer. And
I think we've done articles by him before.
I think we have too, because he actually writes a lot on Decanter.
Okay.
And Decanter is actually a really great news source for anybody who's just interested in reading news on wine. Decanter is really good. There's a paid version and there's a free version. I always do the free version because I'm cheap, but the pay version supposedly has got a lot of stuff. And maybe, Mason, as you and I grow the show, if we start making any money or anything from advertisements or something like that, maybe we'll get a subscription to Decanter, because it does have a lot of really good information. But this particular article, it's about a deal, as the title suggests. It's about the UK. So the UK, for those of you who don't follow the news or are not really interested in it, the UK is leaving the EU on March 29th. As of right now, it's still on schedule. So the U.S. and U.K., though, as a result of this, have signed 2 new agreements to maintain the flow of wines and whiskeys between the 2 countries. This is also, and this is how it ties into your Chilean wines, Mason, is also very, very similar to a Chilean deal between the U.K. and the UK and Chile. And the reason it seems like they're doing this, or the summary reason, is that the UK is a little bit worried that the deal between the EU and the UK will not work out, and there will be very, very high tariffs on wine and going into the UK, or any sort of whiskey alcohol going into the UK and also going out. So the UK wants to establish new trade routes with low tariffs going out, and also for the high demand going in, because although wine is grown, as you and I have discussed multiple times on the show, wine is grown in the UK and very fine wine is produced in the UK. They are also very large consumers of imported wines, particularly French wines. So they're trying to establish this as sort of the backup, but also because the UK is the 4th largest wine consumer of U.S. wines. The market is worth $227 million. And it's also the number 1 export market for U.S. whiskeys at $187 million annually. Now, those numbers don't seem huge, but when you think about it, alcohol is actually not as big of an exportable commodity as you might think. Because, we think of French wines as being this like really great thing, and you go into Total Wine or whatever, and there's a huge French section, there's a huge Italian section, all that. But that's a small fraction of what's available in France or Italy or Spain or wherever, and just a lot of manufacturers just don't export. Everything is domestic. So,
well, I mean, like if you think about it, like, and I think this would be something good to talk to Jackson about. Like, you have to make sure that you know the foreign country labeling laws on top of your own country's labeling laws, and like, or have somebody set up to do the label. You know what I mean? Like,
exactly.
Somebody, yeah.
That actually, you're right. That would be a really good thing to talk to Jackson Blood about, who's still one of our most popular guests, who was on both. I don't know the episode numbers, but he's on our New Year episode, and he was also on just an episode by himself where he introduced us to Bordeaux wines. Really great guest. I want to have him on again to talk about Galician wines or maybe Portuguese wines in the near future. But sort of to that point, Mason, the agreement comes with several regulatory agreements to try to make it easier for UK and US to export to the other country. So this is it includes a lot of labeling regulation requirements and easements, so that it's easier for the UK wines to get into the US and easier for the US wines to get into the UK, or vice versa, or not vice versa, or other types of alcohol, because it doesn't just include wine. It also includes things like special protections for Scotch whiskey and for bourbon. So for those of you who don't know, and this is something I kind of knew, but I just am not really that up on Scotch or bourbon. And I know that we have a lot of listeners who are really interested in Scotch, really interested in bourbon, and they may be able to fill us in a lot more on this. But bourbon and Scotch are both protected classifications of alcohol. Even though Scotch is a whiskey, and it's very similar to like Irish whiskey or even whiskey produced in the United States, and you could produce it the same way. It's sort of along the lines of champagne, where it's not technically Scotch if it's not produced in the correct place and with the correct water and the correct ingredients as Scotch whiskey from Scotland. So, and the same thing with bourbon. Bourbon is specifically a specific type of whiskey from the United States.
Yeah, from Bourbon County.
Yeah, from Bourbon County.
I think is the implication.
Yeah, I think there's I don't know what it's made out of, but is it corn?
I think it's corn and something else.
Okay. So, well, for our listeners who are interested in this, I would be happy to hear from you about what bourbon is, or, the ins and outs of Scotch. If you're an expert on it, I would also be perfectly happy to talk to you about it on the show, because we're trying to expand into mini episodes and side episodes about other types of alcohol besides wine, just to kind of, appeal to a wider audience, and also because I'm very interested in it. And so if you know about it and you want to come on and talk about it, that's great. You can. So what's the plug? So that how can they reach out to us, Mason?
Well, real quick.
Okay.
So Jackson, episodes 33 and 41. So, but yeah, if you want to reach out to us, you can reach out to us at tastinganarchy@gmail.com. If you like the Twitter or how did Mr. Sue refer to it?
Twatter.
Twat?
Yeah, he tries to make everything vulgar. But he's a great guy. He's a great guy.
Yeah. So if you prefer that pronunciation, you can follow us or reach out to Jacob at Tasting Anarchy on Twitter, or if you're old school and you want to comment on one of the episodes, you can go to tastinganarchy.com, where hopefully when we figure out our technical issues, all the episodes will update automatically, and possibly, with all the wines that we have in stock these days, we'll be doing more review writing, and Jackson may be doing some special guest typage.
That's right. So he's got a login now, and maybe he will. Maybe he won't. He's a busy guy, so I don't want to put him on the spot. One of the other things about this article, just before we wrap it up, this is, I guess, the most anarchist or libertarian portion of this article, and that is that this agreement comes with the possibility of easing the 25% tariff on American alcohol to European countries, or to UK specifically. So right now they're under the EU's agreements, and as a response to our steel tariffs and various other tariffs from the Trump administration, they put a very large tariff on U.S. alcohol. But this agreement comes with a stipulation that will be eased, and that they will suspend the 25% import tariff until, or I guess tariff is just synonymous with import. And it will be suspended until further notice. So that, I think, will be very interesting. I'm typing stuff, and so it makes me confused. But but so that, I think that'll be very interesting, and that sort of ties into my next article. Do you have any more comments on this?
Well, no, but I have a weird segue.
Sure.
Because I think we've talked about two things here. One about water usage in South Africa, the drought, and that kind of ties to the mini bridge that I had.
Okay.
So as you know, Jacob, I don't have cable television, and I don't think you do either.
Nope.
But I have a broadcast antenna, so we watch a lot of PBS, and I really like this old house, and because I have an older home, but they are kind of statist, and they clearly kind of have to pose the fact that you gotta meet these regulations, because otherwise you get your house condemned and all that stuff. So they also have the show called Ask This Old House, where they kind of go out and people are like, how do I do this? And they'll show up and help you do it. And it's fun and very interesting, and it's good to see the skills passed along, and and that sort of thing. But one of the things that has been sweeping the country is the reduction in the amount of water that a toilet uses.
Oh, right.
And because they've been trying to bring the gallons per flush down, California has all these insane mandates. And so I was watching it, and there's this institute, basically, and it was of trying to figure out how to achieve 1.28 gallons per flush, because 1.6 is kind of the standard right now.
Okay.
So they're trying to get it down to 1.28, and they came up with because to be disgusting, there are two things the toilet's got to do: clear and ensure that the bowl doesn't stay dirty.
Yes. Yeah.
So they came up with this thing where basically they figured out a way how to use 30% of the flush to clear and 70% to keep the bowl clean.
Okay.
But to do it, they had to use 2 flappers. So one of the things that we always point out is the fact that if the government didn't manipulate the market, how quickly would they have come up with this previously?
Sure. Yeah.
But also now we have exceptionally more complicated toilets, because instead of having 1 flapper, which is the biggest fail point in most toilets outside of the lid or seat, is the flapper. So now you could possibly have 2 flappers go, and then how do you tell which one's the problem? All that stuff, because the government basically subsidizes the cost of water. And that's one of the things that California, they're trying to regulate in California around their own stupidity. It's we've got to punish the consumer because we won't just let the price of water float.
Yeah.
Water's a commodity. If it's so important, why don't you let the price fluctuate?
Yeah. Well, and actually, if you look at the numbers on water usage in California in particular, regulating low flow toilets and all that sort of stuff is like negligible compared to the amount of water that's being used in industrial capacity, but they don't want to regulate industrial usage.
Yeah.
Or agricultural usage, although they do limit agricultural usage above industrial usage. So it's kind of a weird, it's weird the way, the complexity and where they're trying to save water and stuff like that, when they could very easily just go, look, we're not regulating water prices anymore, and the water prices would skyrocket and people would make different decisions. And maybe a double flap toilet would be something that people would decide to do, but it's not clear under the current status malaise that is what's going on.
Yeah, and this makes me think of the classic from my mind, and I think I've told you about this before, but like an MRI machine uses like a boatload of helium. But because the U.S. price of helium is so low, because the U.S. strategic reserve based on like petroleum refining and nuclear reactors, and there's this weird thing where we have a bunch of helium that's not really naturally occurring,
right?
Because like the government subsidizes it, so the price of helium is super low because the government keeps the price of helium super low. So like all the people who produce like MRI machines were just like, well, we never have to worry about that. So the input cost. But like once they started going like, oh yeah, we're going to run out of helium by like 2020, or it's not that soon, but something like that. Basically MRI machines immediately became super efficient with the helium use.
Right.
It's like, yeah, because if you let the market adjust, no, just.
You cut out a little bit there, Mason. So I think maybe it's possibly on your end.
Yeah. So basically, like
you're cutting out, man.
How about now?
Okay, perfect. It's back to normal.
Because like
no, it's cutting out again.
How about now?
Okay, just say a few more things.
Yeah. How about now? Is it cutting out at all?
Perfect. Okay, so it sounds good. I'm going to write down the time because I'm going to adjust for this.
Yeah, sounds good.
Okay. So say again what you were saying.
So I was just saying, like, basically, like, it's clear that, like, if the market was allowed to act, with all the inputs without the government, like, specifically hamstringing one of them, we'd come up with solutions to these problems.
Yeah.
And these problems wouldn't even probably exist. Or if they did, the market would go about solving them when they came up.
Right. Well, you know what? And this is actually, it's cool that you brought this up because this ties into another wine-related article from winesearcher.com. That I think I told you earlier that like I was very offended by this article because I had taken a nap. But it's called Kraft Tax Cuts Big Business a Break, and it's by W. Blake Gray. I assume W. Blake Gray is a boy, but it could be a girl. It could be like Wednesday Wednesday. I guess Wednesday is a girl's name, but there's a libertarian named Wednesday that I chat with frequently, and it's a boy. But that's just his Twitter handle. But anyways, so in this article, I told you I was kind of irritated by it, but it's because I woke up and I was kind of grumpy from waking up from a nap, which is why I don't take naps normally. But, so the article, I'll go ahead and summarize the article real quick, and then we can comment a little bit on it, or you can interrupt me while I comment that, or while I summarize it, because I think there's going to be some stuff in here that you'll find interesting and that you'll want to comment on as well. Okay. So again, the title is Kraft Tax Cuts Big Business a Break. And so in 2017, the quote unquote the Trump tax cuts included tax cuts for, again, quote, craft beverages, which is not very specifically defined, but craft beverages did receive a tax cut. So it's specifically, though, it's in a act called the Craft Beverage Modernization Tax Reform Act. So these tax cuts will actually come to an end in 2019 if they are not extended by Congress. It has been reintroduced to extend, but we'll see if it happens or not. It's tricky right now because of the split Congress. But the author of the article, W. Blake Gray, is unimpressed with this tax cut for the following reasons. Of the annual, quote, lost tax revenue, which I always take exception with lost tax revenue because it's basically saying like, oh, we've lost revenue because we stopped stealing from people. But anyways, so of that, so it's $321 million that they've lost. $50 million of that went to 7 companies, which are the largest beer brewers, and they make more than 2 million barrels annually. This is people like Coors, Anheuser-Busch, those guys. So the largest nationwide brewers receive the bulk, well, not even the bulk, but a very large percentage of the tax cuts. What I would like to say to this guy, this is editorial. what I'd like to say to this guy is, of course they receive the bulk. They produce the bulk.
Mm-hmm.
So if it's a percentage of what they produce, of course they're receiving the percentage of what they produce. But anyways, also he was not happy with this tax cut because it excludes sparkling wine, which is interesting. But sparkling wine is taxed at a different rate than still wine because back in the 1930s when Prohibition was ending, sparkling wine was seen as a luxury item for the very wealthy, and so a higher tax was left in place on champagne and prosecco and all of those types of sparkling wines.
Mm-hmm.
So despite the author being unimpressed, he does say that that he agrees with lowering the tax because he thinks that the reason that the tax was high was to discourage use of alcohol. Mm-hmm. And he goes, well, Prohibition shows us that laws or some sort of thing to discourage people from using a product doesn't work. It creates black markets and that sort of thing. But then what's so funny is that in the next sentence, he goes on to say, if the U.S. really wants to discourage people from using things, despite he just said that this creates black markets and people avoiding the tax, he then says they should raise taxes on guns and ammunition. And it's like, did you just read what you wrote? But okay. All right. Well, moving on. So he says, yeah, go ahead and increase taxes on that because we need to save lives by having a high tax on that, even though I just said that it creates black markets, but whatever.
And like I was going to say, I think more people die in road fatalities due to alcohol than gun violence by like an extreme amount.
Oh yeah. It's like, I think it's like 20 million to like 30 million or to like 70 million or something crazy like that. It's a huge amount. I don't even know the numbers, but it's a lot more. 70 million is like a fourth of the U.S. population. So okay, you're right. So it's probably not anywhere near that amount, but it's a lot.
Yeah. And like, I think even like, I'm kind of mad at myself for using the phrase gun violence because there's a difference between like somebody breaks into your house and you kill them with a gun as opposed to me just shooting a guy in the street for like not giving me his bananas.
Well, and the other thing too about the gun violence statistics is that they include suicides, which is the bulk of gun violence statistics.
Yeah.
It's like 60% of gun violence is suicides. So, take that as you will. But anyways, continuing on the summary. So, he also says that the top 1% are getting a larger cut, about 140 billion. So it's more unfair than the loss of 321 million. So like, I don't really understand the logic of this portion of the article doesn't make sense to me because he goes through for about, well, I get to it right here. So 8 paragraphs in, the author finally concedes that these tax cuts do help a very large number of small producers. So, but also that like, why does, look, the 1% are, so what is 1% of what is the population of the U.S.? 320 million?
Yeah, let's call it that.
So 1% of 320 million. Let's go ahead and do that. So 320 times 0.01. So 3.2 million or 32 million. Mm-hmm. Yeah, 32. So 1%. So that's the 1% supposedly, and they're getting $140 billion tax cut as opposed to a couple, maybe 1,000, maybe 2,000 producers of alcohol are getting 320. Like what the fuck? Like. Well, I don't like to cuss too much on the show, but like, what are you thinking? Like, the numbers don't even make sense in your own, like, on your own premise. Like, this is what always irritates me about people who are always upset about tax cuts, because like the numbers that they give, it's like on your own premise, they don't make any sense. You're talking about completely different numbers of people. But anyways. So 8 paragraphs in, he finally. So this is what irritated me about the article after I was reading it, and I was just like, this guy, he's killing me with this like, and I don't know where he's from, but I assume he's from some wine region in California. Mm-hmm. But so he finally concedes that it does actually help a lot of people, and that he's in favor of these tax cuts. So there are some parts of the bill that seem to be explicitly against small wine producers, though, and he says that needs to be fixed for the new version of the bill. So the bill contains provisions that exempt wineries that use custom crush facilities. So you, John, on let me look at the episode real quick. It was episode 48. On episode 48, we talked to John about this, and he talked about how this is very common. It's called custom crush. Is where you use a facility because you're only using the equipment once a year, so you try to maximize the use of the equipment by allowing multiple people to use it. And so they do this custom crush, and the law, the way that it works is that if you store your finished wine on the premises of the custom crush facility, you're not subject to the exemptions of the taxes. So what this does, and this kind of ties into what you're talking about, the This Old House thing, is that this incentivized wine producers to custom crush and then ship back to their facilities for storage, which is an additional shipping cost, which raises their prices. But the price of shipping is lower than the price that they're receiving for the tax incentives. So they've been doing this. And now the author kind of goes into, he's like, well, some people are not smart enough to take advantage of these. And it's like, come on, dude. Like, these are entrepreneurs. They'll figure it out. But on the same side, I do agree with him that this is ridiculous that this exemption exists. Like, a lot of small wineries do use custom crush facilities, and it is just easier for them to store it on site before they send it to consumers directly or send it to the retail location. So it would make sense for them not to ship it back to their location, but for whatever reason, the law includes this. And so the new law, there's the extension, the 2019 extension, will include some things that are actually very beneficial or potentially very beneficial. So the new law, it will, so right now, alcohol that is 14 to 16% is taxed at a higher rate than alcohol that's under 14%. And the reason that this goes back into your This Old House analogy thing too, is the reason that this exists is because during Prohibition, they were trying to encourage people to produce lower alcohol beverages, or after Prohibition, they were trying to encourage people to produce. So they made these tiered taxes. So they're like, oh, if you're producing a 16% alcohol wine, we want it to be taxed higher because that's bad. Whereas like a 9% wine is good or whatever. So they came up with this tier system. The new law flattens that out and just says, no, all wine is equal and is all going to be taxed at roughly the same rate. And I think this is very interesting because right now, there are wines that go to 14, 15, 16%. But for the most part, wine is at about 3.5%. And they are allowed to guess 1% high or low. So we could be, 13.5% that's taxed at 13.5%. Could theoretically be 14.5%. But it's likely going to be around 13.5. But
it could be as low as 12.5.
Exactly. It could be lower. It could be higher. It's really, it just depends. But the new law flattens that out, and I'm wondering what we're going to see now that the law flattens it out in regards to what people produce. So the author, and I think he attributes the higher percentage of alcohol, because he says this is due to a lot of wines now have a much higher percentage of alcohol. And he says this is attributed to two things. One is modern viticulture procedures, which allow people to pick grapes at the appropriate time where there's the maximum amount of sugar for fermentation, or global warming. And so I put a little note in there and I said, clearly he didn't get the memo that climate change is the new thing and global warming is a thing of the past that nobody talks about anymore. It's all climate change now, but he specifically says global warming. And actually I talked about this in the last episode, which was episode 53 with Mr. Sue. I don't specifically disbelieve in global warming or climate change or whatever. I believe in markets, and the markets do kind of show that people, for whatever reason, whether it's climate change or new technology, are moving north for wine production, or they are expanding north. They're not moving north. There's still a ton of people in Texas, still a ton of people in other places that are south producing wines that I think are very good wines, but there is a expanding, and it may be demand, it may be technology, it may be the availability of hybrids that do very well in colder climates. Who knows what it is, but I believe that in markets.
Well, let's give it this. It's human tenacity.
Yeah.
Because, people produced wine in Britain before they had any of this. And wine production was
right.
Not necessarily the now, but was definitely larger than, the 50s at some point in Britain's past. So, and it was colder, I'm going to use air quotes then, or, however they supposedly skew the data. But, they did produce more wine in Britain in the past. So,
yeah. But it's all, I'm sure it could all be attributed to, like I said, I don't believe or disbelieve. I believe in markets, and I believe in, like you said, human tenacity. They'll figure it out and they'll produce what is appropriate to clear. And if it doesn't clear, they'll liquidate, and that'll adjust resources to the appropriate area. But just to complete it, there's one last point on this article, and that is, and this is something that the author did get correct, I think, and I briefly touched on it before, but he says that he thinks that these taxes, the 14 and above tax, has encouraged producers to make lower alcohol wines, and that he thinks that we'll see a higher alcohol wine such as Zinfandel, Amarone, which is an Italian varietal, I think, the California style Petit Syrah, which is a very high alcohol Petit Syrah, and really just any red wines from a warmer climate are going to have a higher alcohol content. So he thinks that we don't see a lot of that because the taxes disincentivize people from either A, growing the grapes, or B, growing the grapes that produce higher alcohol. So I thought this was an interesting article. I'm excited to see what happens with it. Maybe we'll follow it a little bit. Any thoughts on I guess tax cuts in this regard? Like, this is one of the things that you and I try to cover as much as possible, because I don't think a lot of other liberty-oriented shows are covering specifically the alcohol related taxes and interventions. But this is, I think, an article that really drives home one of the things you and I talk about a lot when it comes to government distortions of the market. And in this case, you can see just by the numbers, I mean, they're not ungodly huge numbers, but like $320 million of revenue a year is sucked out of the wine industry into the government coffers, which could be passed on to you, the consumer.
Let's use our previous article. It was $287 million worth of exports to Britain. So the tax revenue is more than the value of U.S. exports, the fourth largest export partner for wine,
right,
for the United States.
Yeah.
So, it would be different if, if you're like, oh, it's our 17th partner or something, I don't, you and I don't agree with taxes at all, but if you were like, oh, it's less than our 17th partner, it's like, okay, you have statistics far enough down to get to 17 on the trade partners for wine.
Sure.
Okay. But, that's one of those perverse incentives. It's we make the British market more pleasant for us to do business in with the trade deal. And then we're still not even if we still had those other taxes, we're still not even clearing the taxes.
Yeah.
So then we, suddenly have more, it's those perverse incentive structures from taxes where it's okay, so now do they produce higher alcohol volume wine? Is that even what people want necessarily? Because rosé, as we've discussed previously, is very popular. How does this would be something I'd be interested in talking to John about, because let's say that higher alcohol wine takes longer to just ferment because it's converting more sugar. So, let's say that they lapse.
Right.
Is that something that he would even, one, is that something he's even concerned about, because the way he produces, he may not even, he's yeah, it sucks to, have that tax, but I'm not really even, he may not be even shooting in that range. So, it's a good question of, okay, so what happens there? To try to figure that out. Does that even matter to people? From the production standpoint, is this one of those things where it's somebody just reading statistics and saying, oh, this makes sense, or what's going on? It would be an interesting question from that standpoint. I did a quick search behind the scenes. In 2016, 37,806 people died in car accidents in the United States. In 2016, there were, now this says homicides, and I don't know how homicides is defined in this regard. But there were 11,004 gun homicides in 2016. So, I don't know if that includes, just straight murder, or does it include people let's say somebody broke into my house, punched my wife, and I shot them in the back as they ran away.
Right.
Which is, in some states that's murder. In other states, it's it's not a slap in the wrist, but it's, you're not going to spend the rest of your life in jail. You're probably not going to spend a huge amount of time in jail, but they're going to punish you. And in other states, it's one less jackass. So, but that's it's 29%, it's 29% of the 11,000 is 29% of 37. So, or 37,000. So, not really thinking on how to do the math to give the percentage difference and all that. But that's one of those things where it's okay, so $37 million or $300 million in lost tax revenue. So guns are so deadly, 11,000. So, just for our love of numbers, Jacob, as we like to do randomly, where we will throw random statistics into the show. So let's see what 11,000 works out into the U.S. population.
Wait, say that one more time.
I'm going to take the 11,000 and divide it by the U.S. population.
Okay.
That's something like point 0.00034337. So like 4 zeros. Like, and that's not a percentage, but like, that's not even 1% of the U.S. population killed in gun related deaths. Like, right. Not that it's like it's not like that's it's a great number, but like it's still almost 3 times as many people killed in car accidents. And like, oh, guns are the worst thing in the U.S. It's like,
right? No,
like, yes, it is unfortunate when people are killed by guns that they didn't want to be killed by. I don't know how to better phrase that.
Right.
But I mean, it's unfortunate anytime somebody takes their life. But at a certain point, like, oh, I've got more cancer than anything, I'm in the most pain ever. It's like, well, here you go.
Yeah.
Like, I'm not telling you to kill yourself, but if that's what you choose to do, like, I get it. But like, yeah. Have you seen those like Reddit gifs of like people just like pushing motorcyclists or bicycle riding people over, or like idiots in cars just doing U-turns in like the worst place and like taking out a guy on a motorcycle? It's like most of those people, like most people in the United States, probably shouldn't be trusted to drive. And like that's again the perverse incentive structure of the government making roads so cheap that you can have these people who truly shouldn't qualify to have operate a 2,000 plus or however many tons. I know it's not 2,000 tons, but cars are getting more heavier and heavier, as Eric Peters points out. Like these just death machines, basically. That like, oh, the Tesla and the Prius and all those are so quiet. They're the deadly Prius, as South Park told us.
Right.
Like, the government's like, they've got to be noisier. It's like, wait a minute. Like, doesn't the noise also mean like less fuel efficiency and stuff? So now you're making me like have a perverse incentive structure where like the car has to make some noise.
They actually, it's funny here's an anecdote, is in Dublin, when I went there many, many years ago, 10 or 15, well, like 12 years ago, I guess it was. I went to Dublin and they have like a light rail type thing there. Mm-hmm. And it's so quiet that people kept getting run over by the light rail. and so they made the light rail have this really obnoxious beep. Mm-hmm. So now it just goes like beep, 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 beep as it goes by. And it's just like, oh my gosh. Like I said, it's so funny though that like that's what's going on. And even with the beeping, because of the Doppler effect, if it's going fast enough, you don't hear it until it's like almost right there.
Until it's on top of you.
Yeah.
You're being run over by the Dublin light rail.
Right. Yeah, exactly. Yeah. So apparently they had like a huge number of like fatalities from the light rail just running people over because they're stumbling out of bars drunk in the middle of the night or whatever.
Yeah.
And it goes right downtown. Yeah. Not that the Irish are all drunks, even though they are.
No, it's just it happens to take out the brightest of society.
Right. Exactly.
The people stumbling out of the bar at like midnight. Or whatever it is.
Right. Exactly.
But then again, that's probably also perverse government incentive structures that are causing these people to get like incredibly hammered because they limit the amount of time the employee, like somebody can like consume alcohol at like an establishment.
Well, actually, what's funny is I had a tweet earlier this week that was fairly highly like thumbs up or whatever it's called on Twitter, liked, and it was something like, the year is 2050. I'm still young because of new technology, but the new generation, very small generation because of low productivity, is complaining about about how capitalism forces them to work 20 hours a week. And that was basically the gist of the tweet. Because I've been seeing all this stuff where people are like, it's slavery to have to work 40 hours a week for a company and doing something you don't want to do and all that sort of stuff. I'm like, oh my gosh, like, you have, like, granted, I am so grateful that I don't work nearly as much as I used to. Or at least I probably work the same number of hours as I used to, but it's flexible now. Mm-hmm. And I'm so grateful that I'm not putting in 50, 60 hours a week. And like these people who are complaining that they have to work, or like it's slavery that they have to work because they have to be able to afford rent and food and all that sort of stuff. And it's like your anger toward your company or toward whatever's going on in society is so misplaced when it's inflation that you should be mad about. Like the deflationary pressure is so high that everything would be so cheap and we'd be working maybe 15 hours even. Like you'd be working way lower hours just to get your just to get by. But right now, so much of your time is consumed by the government. We'd at least be working, at least me, would be working 20% less per week if it was by hourly as a result of the government's taxation. But then in addition to that, you have inflation, which is the official numbers are 2 or 3%, but the shadow statistics show that it's like 10%, maybe more.
Yeah, exactly. And that's just one of those things where like people just don't seem to get it.
Yeah.
Like,
well, I totally empathize with them because it's not an easy thing to see. You see that you have to work for your boss that you don't like. That makes sense. Like, it's like, okay, I get it. You don't like your boss. You see that, and so you're mad at that. But like, just take an additional step. And actually, like this article that we were talking about is kind of a good example of that. It's like he's mad that they gave a tax break to wine and not wine, but specifically these large brewers. Mm-hmm. And then on the flip side, then he's like, you should be taxing guns and ammunition. And it's like, yeah, but that's your personal choice. That's what you think is valuable. When you and I just went over the statistics, and it's like, yeah, guns don't actually cause that much carnage compared to alcohol.
Exactly. And it's one of those things where it's like, compared to alcohol, like, and like what's the heroin death rate? You know, like,
yeah. Well, and that's what's the joke that Walter Block always tells, where the guy comes in and he asks the economist, and there's a classic economist joke where he asks the economist and he goes, "Hey, how's your wife?" And the economist says, "Compared to what?" And like that's the joke, and it's just like you can't make these statements in a vacuum. You do have to compare it to something, and it's like, yeah, you know what? It sucks that people killed themselves, and it sucks that there's gun violence. It really does. But compared to what? Like, why are you focusing this much energy on something that's a minuscule percentage compared to these other problems? You should be focusing on privatizing the roads. The roads are causing tons and tons of death per year.
Yeah, and that's the thing is like, like those statistics, like one of the things that they, people don't bear out, and like you see like in like shootings, people are like, well, how did they even get the gun? Yeah. Like they do all this thing, and nobody goes like, well, was the road design so shitty? Is that what killed the person? Yeah. Like, not a fault of the driver. Like, in Virginia Beach, like, they keep using this one paving company, and I swear they don't grade the roads properly. So there's just twice the amount of standing pooled water in places.
Right.
And my wife and I were driving to my parents' house, and so we got off and, like, we went past Virginia Westland, and, like, there was, like, I saw the slick of water, and I, hit it in such a way that I knew it wouldn't, like, kill us.
Yeah.
But basically, it's, like, just a place where anytime it rains, there's just permanently standing water there now. Yeah. And, like, this was a big expansion project, and, like, the road is, like, so oddly, like, angled up at random places. Like, it just pools water continuously, and it's like, how many people are killed because the road is so badly designed, maintained, executed. Like, I've heard of people getting, like, out of speeding tickets because there's some sort of federal requirement where you do this study to determine the speed that the road should be. Yeah. And, like, you could get, like, some measure of that. So, but I think, for both of us, I think that's a good stopping place for us tonight.
I think so too. Let's go ahead and let's recap the wine real quick. So I had the Neethlingshof Estate 2017 Pinotage. I give this a high rating. It's 14% alcohol by volume, $15 at Total Wine. I would take a look at it if you guys are interested in Cabernet Franc, because I think it's very similar. If you just kind of like Cabernet Sauvignon or a more aggressive red blend, this, I think, is good for you. Now, I know that's a little bit confusing when I say Cabernet Franc and aggressive red blend, because Cabernet Franc is a little bit more of a mellow, smoother Cabernet Sauvignon, but I really do think that this is more like the more aggressive Cabernet Francs out of like Argentina or Italy. Not so much like the French or the Napa ones, but yeah, go ahead and give it a try. I highly recommend it. Mason, what do you think about your wine?
So I have a completely different, but also very, to me, a very well approved red wine. So it's the Donnachiara's Campania and Aglianico, IGT 2016, $17.99 at the Total Wine in Norfolk, Virginia. So if you're in Texas, probably around the 15. So, but it's not super aggressive, but a very good red wine flavor. The alcohol, if I remember correctly, is in the 14% range. Don't have the bottle in front of me, but it's a very nice red wine. Like if you're not looking for something that's super aggressive and you kind of want I think this is kind of what people see in Pinot Noir.
Okay.
Like, that I don't necessarily pick up on. Like I'm not saying the flavors are the same. So like, nobody jump on us for that. But like the subtleness of it, like the flavor is subtle,
right?
But it's still satisfying. Like it was every glass was a good glass of red wine. When I got it opened up and oxidized a little more, it was had a little more acidity to it, but nothing where it was just like like as we were talking about like Carbonare previously, where it's like a big punch up front. It was just a solid and good bottle of wine. I'm really looking forward to you having a chance to open yours and let us know what you think about it.
Okay. I'll try to do a mini on that soon. But I've like I said, I got 4 minis planned for next week, so I'll probably do one next week, and then that'll be out in a couple of weeks on Tuesday. So everybody remember, we release Tuesdays and Fridays. So I guess that's really it from Tasting Anarchy. We got plugs, don't we?
Things. You want to hear some other guys talk just general liberty? You got the Fagcast with Car Campin and Birdarchy. If you want to hear like a little more directed and specific conversations, check out Sounds Like Liberty with Nikki P and his wife Lizzie. They're really into music. I was just recently recorded an episode with them. Hopefully, when they release it, we can link to it in this one. And Jake's been on both of those.
Yep, that's true. I've been on both, and hopefully we'll have Car on ours. And also last week I did I think it was episode 52 or 53 with Mr. Sue. So check that out as well. And also check us out at Tasting Anarchy on Twitter or tastinganarchy.com, or you can email us at tastinganarchy@gmail.com. And I think that covers the plugs. From me, stay free.
Stay free, everybody.
Drinking wine, supposed you to drink wine. Wine, supposed you to drink wine. Wine, supposed you to drink wine. Pass that bottle to me. Hoy! Drink at me. Oh, give me some of that slop. Oh, pass that bottle to me. If you want to get along in Peterstown, buy some wine and pass it around. The age runs up to 49. All them cats, they love sweet wine. Drinking wine's for you to drink wine. Wine's for you to drink wine. Wine's for you to drink wine. Pass that bottle to me. Hoy! Wine, wine, wine. Elderberry. Wine, wine, wine. Cherry, cherry. Wine, wine, wine. Blackberry. Wine, wine, wine. Port and sherry. Wine, wine, wine. Oh, pass that bottle to me. Now down on Gillsby at Willie's Den, he wasn't selling but American gin. One soldier wanted a bottle of wine. He hipped that cat for $1 and a dime. Drinking wine for you to drink wine. Wine for you to drink wine. Wine for you to drink wine. Pass that bottle to me. Now I got a nickel, have you got a dime? Let's get together and get some wine. Somebody's fifth and somebody's fourth. When you get together, you're doing things smart. Drinking wine for you to drink wine. Wine for you to drink